I had my first job as a nurse's aide, and people were referred to as crazy lunatics. And there's good mental illnesses and bad mental illnesses. Schizophrenia, depression, manic depressive disorder, drug addiction, alcoholism, borderline personality disorder. Those were just the adjectives that were used. It's whether people realize they're talking about people in that way or not.
Because I think that there's this myth about mental health. As for crazy people, and if you go to a mental health counselor, it means you're crazy, and they're going to judge you, and they're going to tell you what's wrong with you, and they're going to tell you what to do. And I want no part of that.
Let's not label her. Let's not look at it. She's different. She's struggling.
We're all the same.
Yeah,
we are all the same.
When I was 16, you didn't say the word cancer. It was hush hush. Now you have fundraiser runs, breast cancer rowing championships. I'm not sure when the term mental illness even started being used, because for a long time it wasn't considered an illness, mental illness, and people tend to get angry at, feel like the person's choosing that, and so they could choose not to do it. It is in the diagnostic manual as an illness, but it's never as easy as some people think it is. Each person's reaction to their condition and how they deal with it, and a supportive family environment makes a huge difference. There's a customer who comes in here all the time who's very schizophrenic. You can tell that he hears voices, and he rarely smiles. But yet, if you engage him, he's very friendly as long as other people tolerate his odd behaviors. He does okay. He still has this condition, but he's not in an institution. He gets to do things he enjoys. There's lots of controversy about what's the best care delivery system. And if you don't have a good system to deal with involuntary care, when a person's a danger to themselves or others, have even hurt other people, even killed other people, if you don't have a way to take care of them involuntarily, then they go to jail. And I don't think that should be the alternative. So even though over my whole career I've been interested in deinstitutionalization, I still think there's a place for it if the only alternative is jail. Years ago, people would go into, say, a state hospital when they were in a crisis, and then they'd stay in the state hospital. Your community doesn't want you back, or you don't have a family. That's where the stigma comes in. And so people would get better in the hospital, and then that's where you had these big institutions where people actually worked in the laundry, worked in the kitchen, worked on the farm. They basically were okay to go back out into the community, but that wasn't there yet.
And in a way, that's what Wellspring was found. Mary and I started a nonprofit, small mental health and wellness center. And its mission was really to make mental health accessible financially, geographically, and availability in terms of enough clinicians in the area. And what I found is every time, a new clinician, like supporting clinicians getting licensed and working here, every single one of them got full like this. So even though there can be an attitude of a stigma about mental health, the reality is that people are really hungry for it, and they just kind of took to it. And so there's this load that they can bear, it frays, and kids can feel the effect of that. And so I think that that was an entry point into, so as kids got service, their parents got support, attention and support. How can we help you? What else is going on here? And I think through that, I think any adults who come in through that stream go, oh, not so scary. I think what people who do meet with a counselor is find out there's someone who's really interested in them and their story, and what their stresses and struggles are in their life. And so to have another caring adult actually listen to them and support them and help them find their own truth, their own way, they can grow into a healthier life that they didn't know they could. But I wonder how many people who might say that publicly actually may have some experience with it and they would never admit it or never want anyone to know. What is crazy? You know, what is crazy?
I've been in the system since 5.5 years old. I went into state's custody at 5.5 due to sexual abuse, trauma by my father. I have dealt with a lot of various levels of trauma, and I'm actually going through a pretty traumatic experience right now. I just gave birth to my second child. His name is Tanner. And he's in DCF custody because I'm mentally challenged. I have mental issues. I'm also dealing with the fact that my first child, who's going to be 3 in February, his name is Nathaniel. He was taken by DCF custody right from the hospital. In DCF's eyes, because I struggle with depression and anxiety, and I have a history of self-mutilation and suicidal attempts, I can't parent my child safely. And it is a bunch of bull crap.
It all comes down to this thing that we've created, this mental illness, those 2 words, mental illness. They have created this thing called stigma because there's the assumption that there's something wrong with you, that you're ill in some way, that somebody else isn't ill, that makes you an object to be feared and to be suspected and to be not understood. There is very little room when you say mental illness, there's very little room for empathy. There's room for judgment. When you can move mental illness to trauma survivor, to what happened to you, then you have room for empathy.
I'm constantly getting looked at like, what's wrong with you? You know, you don't deserve your child because you are mentally challenged or you have these issues, and if you can hurt your body, what's to say you wouldn't hurt your child? I think that it really makes it challenging for people to deal with traumatic experiences when they're constantly being looked at and judged and labeled and etc. And I really feel that we need to have more places like this versus crisis beds. I've learned a lot from when I very first came here. I was very nervous when I first came here. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be looked at as mentally challenged or mental retardation, that I'm different. And when I came in the door, just like the overwhelming feeling of love and empathy, and we're on this journey with you. It's not us against you. We're all together. We're all equals.
So the language is a big deal, especially for alternative or integrated projects like this one.
We call it peer support.
We try not to make the word peer into a noun.
Right.
We can say we use peer support. Like if you were a tennis coach, you could be peer support. If you were both tennis coaches, you know, I mean, it's just because you've got the same stuff going on.
Yeah.
We don't subscribe to the mental illness framework here. If somebody comes to see us and they believe they're mentally ill, that's fine. They can believe that, and they can exist within that structure. But we just look at what happened to you. So when we talk about somebody with lived experience, whether they're a staff person or a guest person, we're looking at somebody who's had some tough stuff happen in their life, who has used some coping mechanisms that were probably not totally happy or healthy. And we ask them what happened to them, or we ask ourselves, what did we do, and what can we do to change things? How can we change our thinking? How can we change what we do to make our lives better? And so that eliminates that whole stigma thing. The stigma thing is really attached to the diagnosis and the labeling that happens with mental health. And people who have had diagnosis and who have absorbed the labeling and who fall into that mental illness category really do struggle with stigma. They really do struggle with, because they enter a mindset that's very different. It's a different culture that they enter. So I just think that it's a deadly thing, this stigma, but I think it comes with the terms mental illness, and it comes with the judgments that other people have on people. And a lot of the meditative neuroscience now is coming out with how to use specific meditation techniques to send the mind into parts of the brain, to stimulate parts of the brain to create restructuring and growth. So we're working with that, and we're looking at that, and we're using it as a staff team. We use it with guests here. Honestly, I think it's got to come down to we're all the same.